Thank you.
Just so yeah. So a very warm welcome to Mr. Ahmed Javed, who is the former police commissioner of Mumbai and the 20th Indian ambassador to Saudi Arabia. We are extremely fortunate to have you on board, sir, and we are extremely excited to hear about some wise words of wisdom on the topic that you're going to share today, which is journey from top cop to top diplomat. So, friends, uh, just to let you all know what to expect from today's session is a couple of points, which is stressful times, understanding the situation about the stressful time, and how to cope and maintain a very responsible and a calm behavior. The second thing is what all that we need to know about what is policing all about. The third point is to be better informed as a responsible citizen about law enforcement. And the fourth point that we're going to learn today about is the Indo Saudi relations today and an overall bird's eye view about that geography. So, once again, a very, very warm welcome to you, Mr. Javed. And I would now like to invite Mr. Sapan Gupta, who is our CFO, to further introduce Mr. Javed. Over to you, Sapanji.
Good afternoon, all. My name is Sapan Gupta. I am the Chief Financial Officer of Rodic Consultants. I have been given this opportunity to introduce to all of you a dynamic and iconic personality, Mr. Ahmed Javed. I am indeed privileged and honored. Mr. Ahmed Javed graduated from St. Stephen College, Delhi. He joined the IPS and belonged to 1980 batch of Maharashtra cadre. During his tenure with police, he handled various key assignments, which inter alia includes Deputy Commissioner of Police, Nashik City, Commissioner of Police, Solapur City, and then he went on to become Commissioner of Police, Mumbai City, one of the most coveted posts to have as an IPS. These assignments provided him with wide and deep exposure, the whole gamut of police working in all spheres. It entailed supervision and close involvement in the maintenance of law and order, prevention and detection of crime, management of traffic and security cover, both rural and urban policing, and that too in one of the largest metropolitan areas in the world. He is the recipient of various medals, and to name the few, the Police Medal for Meritorious Service, the President Police Medal for Distinguished Service, the Director General Insignia. Once he superannuated as a cop, he deservingly appointed as Ambassador of India to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. It is a very rare of an IPS to be appointed as diplomat. He served there till March 2019. During this period, we saw intense level of activity and engagement, both bilaterally and otherwise. Although his list of achievements are very long, but due to paucity of time, I am constrained to shorten it to a large extent. So, friends and colleagues, presenting to you our today's chief guest, Mr. Ahmed Javed. So, over to you, sir.
Hello, good afternoon. If everybody can hear me,
Yes.
Yes, sir, we are
I
fine.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir, we can hear you.
We can hear you.
yeah, great.
Yes, we can hear you.
So let me start with good afternoon in these extremely challenging and I would say unknown times in a lot of ways, and all of us have to cope with this one way or the other because I don't think anybody could have really envisaged or planned for such an emergency or such a great catastrophic situation as we're facing right now. So therefore, it must be also a little strange to have uh, somebody like me who has spent more than 3.5 decades as a cop and then went on to a totally new area of diplomacy. I really don't know what your people have told you, but it's always good to listen or talk or interact with somebody from totally outside of your worldview to give you what realities on the other side are, and sometimes then you'll realize that probably it doesn't look as bad as it does. So I hope it turned out like that. I also looking forward to an active Q&A session, uh, which should follow. Will follow after this. So briefly, I mean, before I start, and I think
one of two things is the definition of operational excellency. Why should we think and live on operational excellence? What do we mean by it? Why should we think about it? Why is it important?
Hari,
Why it is coming? And
sorry,
the
sir.
next bullet I wanted to put is this: how do you embed operational
Hari,
excellence in your DNA? Now, when I call
really sorry, sir.
no, not an issue. It happens at the best of times. I don't worry. I think all of us have all the time. So as many question comes, I have no problem. Just hear me out to get you sort of a level playing field to know exactly what we are going to be having today, this afternoon. First of all, I'm sure, and it goes without saying that all of you are, despite all the challenges, are taking this in your stride like a good, responsible citizen. Of course, sacrifices have to be made. Think of the people who are not as privileged or as well placed, I would say, as many of us. And therefore, we should contribute whatever we can, both psychologically and financially, wherever and whenever it's possible. Please do remember that these are things which, as I said a little earlier, where nobody really has could have prepared for, because I think in our living memory, the last pandemic which really created real havoc, and those were the days when there was no, of course, a wired world like we have today. In the 1918 to 20, when the Spanish flu, as it was called, swept large areas of the globe, and in which people say, as per record, anything between 30 to 50 million people perished, including Indians, who, if you remember, the Spanish flu, influenza, or the flu started just at the end of the First World War, 1918. And I think a lot of it were carried by soldiers returning back to places like India, as far as away as New Zealand, Australia. Good as an Indian citizen, if you become a little more responsible citizen than what you are, and if you forget some of your rights at some moments, but look at your duties, it will become a joint affair between the police and other law enforcement agencies when it comes to keeping the place, the environment, and the city and the country that way a better place than we may have found it. Uh, I would say today policing is far more challenging than it was when we joined service. That is exactly 40 years ago. This is my 40th year. Of course, I'm retired now, but had it been on, it would be 40th year. The reason is the expectation of the public has gone really north. Thanks to the technology, thanks to the connected world, thanks to a lot of things, the expectations of the police from the police from of the public is immense. The expectations of the media, the expectations of the politics, everybody is high. No denying that fact, and it's okay. But the other level playing field is sometimes not so level, and therefore the challenge comes in. Uh, as a matter of fact, I don't know if you all are aware, we are governed by rules and regulation about everything because it's a law enforcement agency. Even what is to be worn on a given day, what is the kind of response you have to give, it's all laid down. It's legal, and we have lot of other bodies which actually oversee, which is fair enough. But the number of bodies which have started overseeing, apart from the traditional ones like the media or the judiciary or the government itself, has been expanding on a regular basis. So it's now we have, instead of one or two, but multiple levels. And in India, every overseeing body likes to really oversee, and sometimes it is a huge challenge because it is like, it's like you're worried more about being overseen than actually about working. But these are challenges which I'm telling you the police department faces regularly. And I'm sure I'll tell you some of the situations are unthinkable. Like yesterday, and I'm going by the public domain information, like yesterday, while enforcing the curfew, this officer in Punjab had his hand cut off. I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, have read about it or seen it. And it is a great, I would say, achievement of the medical fraternity that got his hand and the wrist back. And we are all hoping that he will recover quickly. Now, this sort of a thing, I don't think anybody could have imagined would happen. It happens, especially in law and order situations. Now, when we talk about these kind of situations happening, we also looking at, for example, I remember years ago I was doing a sort of a training with the British police, and we were amazed. We were a group of officers. We were amazed that when the time is over, the guy says, "Okay, my time is up. I'm going home." In India, it can never happen. A guy who's finished his duty, we have shifts. I don't think he will ever say, or as a matter of fact, it is expected that he will get up and say, "Now it's 2 o'clock. My duty is over. I'm going." Because if there's a problem going on, he is bound to stay there on duty, and therefore sometimes, like I said, situation like in 1984, 7 days, nobody even thought of saying, "Listen, sir, I've got to go home. I've got children. Or I haven't had a bath." Nothing like that. But it happens elsewhere. So therefore, when we talk about these challenges, please look at the cop on the street, especially that where he comes from, what all he has to go through. Many things have changed for the better now, especially in a state like Maharashtra. I'll tell you, we have seen a great change, but still there's much to do, and still that's many of those challenges remain. So next time you see a policeman or a police officer doing his job, like yesterday I saw a video which I thought was really would have made it, had it been in the movies, probably people would accept it. Here were these curfew violators, all middle class, upper middle class, padha likha people like you and I, who had violated it. They had been rounded up by police, and this police officer is giving them a little bhashan. In the end, he says, "I have to say sorry to X, Y, Z because of you guys. You're not responsible enough of your duties, that you may be a threat to not only yourself, to others. You may be a threat to others. We are talking about health threat, mind you." And all these 50 guys in the end say sorry to him. Now, why should a situation like this come? Actually, if you see, some of them sometimes go a little, harsh on it, which is of course not acceptable. Uh, Policing had been a great challenge. Policing has been great fun, very satisfying, because especially if you help a guy, help means do him justice actually, not to go out of the way of doing something wrong. And especially if he has had nobody to call up or use his plate, as we say, the thank you that it comes from him is probably the most satisfying anything, this thing, whether it is better than the pay or the promotion, because it comes from the bottom of his heart, and with that comes the dua, as we say, the blessings. And police department, in my opinion, throughout the years gives you such an opportunity to help genuinely needy people needing help, and do it consistently. We cannot probably help in economic ways, like giving you a house or giving you a job or something like that, but there are a lot of issues where we can help out, and it's been a great satisfying experience being a cop all these years. If I were to do it all over again, I would still be where I started off as a cop. We had options of other things, but we didn't opt for it. With that, I'll stop. As far as the policing goes, I'm sure if some questions come up, I may cover up something which I may have wanted to say, but I have overlooked it in this monologue that is going on at the moment. Once I retired, and it came as a huge surprise to start with, when I got this appointment as our ambassador to Saudi Arabia. Please remember, representing the country is a huge honor. It's a great prestige, but a huge honor, because you're representing not only your country and all that it stands for, but you're also trying. You're there trying to do something which will make the bilateral relations go better, higher, more beneficial to our nation, and of course, internationally, it makes an impact. So it was probably the biggest surprise because typically this is a rare thing. I'm sure many of you know. We don't jump services like this from being a police officer to being a diplomat. Anyway, grace of God and thank to the government that I landed up there in Saudi Arabia. And I'll come back to the perception part of it. Like people have, we have perceptions about everything, including the things which are right in the face as the police, because you see them every day, whether you like it or not. Similarly, you had perceptions. I also, although I visited that country briefly 2 3 times, but for a very short time and for a very limited purpose, is the perception, whether it's the weather, you have a perception. I'm sure all of you sitting there, I don't know whether you can say it or not later. I'm sure that one of the things of the perception is that Saudi Arabia has to be very hot, a lot of desert, hot desert, oil rich, conservative. Nothing grows there, nothing much is there. Maybe they are wealthy, rich, but that's it. That's a perception. So let me start with this perception being, and same perception I went with, although I visited this country, of course, they're rich, big country, 2/3 the size of India, so it's we're looking at. But many other things one was not clear about and something which one didn't know at all. Let me start with the first perception is the weather. So surely we thought it is going to be hot. Of course, they have good cooling systems because that's not a problem. But the weather will be hot, hardly anything grows, and oil and desert. Well, for 6 months, let me tell you, 6 months of the year in Saudi Arabia, especially in the central and north Saudi Arabia, 6 months it is cool, cooler, coldest. So by so in January end and February, we used to use the heating system in the house. I would have never imagined it had I not gone stayed there. It rains a lot. Don't compare our rains, not as desperately rains like Mumbai, but rains a lot by desert standards. And in all the 3+ years I was there, it rained a little more than the previous year. North Saudi Arabia got to see snowfall, which I think I would have never believed had I not seen it ourselves. And this is one perception which got totally out of the way. Things about growing, the kind of stuff we grew at home in the embassy as part of the house, just for the lark of it. Apart from the flowers, the vegetables, you can see the fruits, the citrus fruits, almost all the vegetables you can think of, practically. And the amount of, this dates, of course, which is ethnic to that place. So that also got, and it's not only in Riyadh we are growing it in these winter season. In a lot of parts of Saudi Arabia, especially which gets a lot more rain, and is the hill stations, they grow naturally also. So once I traveled a lot in that country, mainly because I had to see what are the situations for our Indians. Mind you, of course, I knew that there were a lot of Indians there. But what I didn't know was that when I landed up there were more than 3 million Indians, the largest single Indian passport holding diaspora in the entire world. Please remember my words, Indian passport holding diaspora. So somebody can say there are more Indian origin guys in the US. Sure, there are. But they are not Indians. No, they are either Americans or Canadians or some other nationality. So Indian passport holding diaspora largest at that time in 16 when I went was in Saudi Arabia. 3.1 million people working, living, some for 20, 30 years, and having some of them, I would say about 60-65% of them having some. So this was another perception that, the third is the important thing is how we were perceived there. When I saw these numbers, I obviously put 2 and 2 together that we must be well perceived because there isn't any other foreigner community as Indians. And in my interactions over the years there with the officials, the royals, the public, we are perceived, the Indians, mind you, Indians, and they are not bothered about what is your background of faith. You could be anybody, Christian, Hindu, Muslim, but if you're an Indian, you are number one in preference, whether it is for a blue-collar job or it is for IT. The only other place where I found a lot of Indians were in education there, in IT, in some of your the job that you all are doing. I found a lot of Indians there as well. Saudi Arabia and India have had very, very close relationships from centuries. especially in the south. If you see the western coast of India, the Arab traders came much earlier and in a different situation than in the north. And therefore, you found that the interaction between Kerala and the west coast of India and the Arabian Peninsula, the whole, not only that time there was no Saudi Arabia, has been going on from years. And therefore, we are a known commodity there. As a matter of fact, the kind of exchange that has happened over the years, one didn't realize it so much as you find the influence in the languages, like Indian languages, especially Marathi, that's our mother tongue here, has so many Arabic words. Even today, although we now use it as a Marathi word, as Marathi words, our influence in the Arabian Peninsula, especially in food, in dress, in culture, in arts, is immense. For example, Saudi Arabians, especially the whole of the Gulf, but especially Saudis, they cannot have a single meal in the day without rice. So some of them have it 3 times a day, by the way. And rice is not grown in Saudi Arabia. It was never grown except for a small little portion on the eastern side. We had some very coarse brown rice, but they had no rice. But over the years and today, I think rice is their staple food. And where does the rice come from? We are the single largest rice exporting nation to that country. And we have actually a monopoly, if you ask me. I remember the first year I was there, we exported something like $1 billion worth of rice and cereals. Now, these are the influences. So what I'm trying to say is not that we haven't had a long relationship. We did, but politically, strategically, somehow it had been on a different level, which I think was underachieved. Typically, we were a buyer-seller relationship. We bought oil. 19-20% of our oil came from Saudi Arabia. Then we provided a lot of manpower in terms of the diaspora for many of their jobs. And we had, of course, the religious connect because Indian Muslims would go for Hajj and Umrah. But strategically, as a geography where Saudi Arabia is placed and where we are placed, and the kind of the strategic requirements and importance which should have been given, I think, were not in the same proportion as it has come to today. In the last 4-5 years, for example, I would say, especially in the last 3 years, the role of the Prime Minister as a leader who had this fantastic chemistry with many leaders, but I can say for Saudi Arabia because I saw it happening, changed our entire level of engagement from, say, here to somewhere up there. And it's not only in the traditional fields. Today, India and Saudi Arabia have relationships in such huge areas and newer areas that is unprecedented. And I would say the biggest chunk of this credit should go to the Prime Minister personally, and of course the Crown Prince in Saudi Arabia because of the chemistry they had. So, give you an example. For the first time, one of the single largest one-time investment in a sector happened when Saudi Aramco signed a $22 billion agreement for a 50% engagement in an Indian refinery, a brand new refinery in Maharashtra, which was to cost $44 billion. The 50%, $22 billion were to come from Aramco. Of course, then they hived it off to 11 billion to themselves and 11 billion to ADNOC, which is the UAE's oil company, the biggest oil company, the official oil company of the UAE, ADNOC, Abu Dhabi National Oil Company. Since 22 billion of one, when the Crown Prince came last year, when we brought him to India, before he left $100 billion of investment in India, and he said this is just the beginning. What I'm trying to say is, from a scale where we had practically very little, to 100 billion at the one go, out of which this is one of the biggest investments. We have moved into areas which were totally unknown in the sense, not that they were not there, but somehow they were never explored and therefore they were unknown, is where Our engagement in Saudi was not only in oil, not only in diaspora, but also in defense, in training, in more importantly, in areas of them coming down into downstream in India and we going into areas where they would be finding newer jobs and newer kind of things for us. I'm sure many of you know, if you don't know, the diaspora, Indian diaspora from Saudi Arabia itself sends more than $11 billion back home every year. Of course, between 16 and now, there have been some bits and pieces of changes. There have been ups and some downs. Their economy took a huge hit when the oil slumped in 14 and 15. Of course, we have now another slump here in terms of pricing. Good for us, but not for the economy. So their economy not good, it impacts our diaspora. But the most important thing I'd like to this thing is that the success or the impact of any person or any organization or any policy happens if it's in the right time at the right place. History always is full of it, right time, right place. And therefore, I would say I was the most lucky, grace of God, that I went to Saudi Arabia at a time when it was totally and completely changing, let me tell you. Those of you who have worked there, those of you who have had the occasion to be associated with them, will probably not recognize what it was, say, even as late as 2014 and now in 2018, 19, and 20 definitely. The kind of changes that have happened have opened up new avenues for a lot of countries, especially India. For example, entertainment, movies, shooting, theaters on one side, uh, performing arts, you name it. These are things which were totally, completely closed, one. The changes I've seen in Saudi Arabia between 16 and 19, in these 3 years plus, are something which probably people who lived there for 30 or 40 years prior to this would never have imagined it would ever happen in such a short time. Now, these changes are important for us as a country, as both, you know, at the people to people level and more importantly at a strategic level. Please let me tell you what I can't share, what I can share, I can say that much is the kind of relationship we have with Saudi has impacted many other relationships in our neighborhood, which was not there earlier, to our to our benefit, and that is the most important thing. A bilateral relationship to get stronger and stronger over the years is, I think, the test of diplomacy, the test of leadership, and I think we have been luckier and, on both the accounts. Uh, Finally, I would say that that's my timer saying this is 40 minutes are over. Uh, is that it's always great to have a challenge. It's always great to have a challenge because it makes you do a little more to rise to that occasion. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but that does not deter you from trying, and that is what it is. When I was going there as an ambassador, mind you, I had never been a diplomat, but I have always said, and I've always maintained, especially if you've been in Maharashtra police and in Mumbai, policing is not only about enforcement and this and that, which it is. It is also a lot about diplomacy because every day we are handling situations where it's not necessarily the answer is to either the stick or